I've had moments where we'd have another patient in a wheelchair and they'd be talking to the physician. And then they turn to me and they're like, "Can I ask you a question about your chair?" And I'm like, "Sure, go for it. What do you want to know?" I had another patient recounting a traumatic medical experience, and you could hear in their voice they were imploring for empathy and understanding. My physician was doing the best he could, but the woman turned to me and goes, "I'm sure you understand." I wasn't saying anything, I wasn't doing anything, but it seemed like even just the presence of someone they felt could empathize did a lot in that moment. Experiences like that made me realize how powerful it is to have people in medicine of a variety of different experiences that can empathize with patients of all different backgrounds.
Welcome, everyone. Today, I'm very excited to interview a pre-medical student. Her name is Monica Mezikar, who is an aspiring physician neuroscientist who hopes to integrate disability equity and inclusion into her future medical and scientific career. During her undergraduate at the University of Notre Dame, she majored in neuroscience and behavior and minored in compassionate care and medicine. While she was involved in many roles throughout her time on campus, she is most proud of the fact that she founded and led a student organization for people with disabilities and allies. This experience motivated her to formally pursue disability advocacy post-graduation through an internship with the American Association of People with Disabilities, where she worked with the healthcare insurance company. After this internship, she went on to a post-bac program at the University of Michigan, where she conducted neuroscience research for 2 years. And now she's pursuing additional research at the NIH as she prepares to apply to her MD-PhD program. At the bench, she is most interested in investigating the biochemical mechanisms underlying neurological or psychological conditions, especially in cases that are suspected to have a genetic component. At the bedside, Monica hopes that her own lived experience of being disabled allows her to take a patient-centered approach that emphasizes helping people live well within the context of their condition, achieve personal functional goals, and guide them towards acceptance. Thank you so much for being here, Monica.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. It's really great to talk to you. I'm excited.
I am so glad that you're here. Tell me a little bit about your current background and journey to date.
As you mentioned, I myself am a person with a disability. I use a power wheelchair. I have cerebral palsy, and it primarily affects my balance, gait, and endurance. I also have some dexterity issues as well. I say that in case anyone is listening and in a similar place, how much they can identify different things like that. I graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 2021. And then I went on to the University of Michigan in a post-bac program because I was a product of a pandemic, and also for my own discernment, I hadn't had the chance to engage in the type of research that I wanted to do, which is what drove me towards doing the post-bac. And I'll get into this a bit later, but I also wanted to gain more clinical experience because that was harder for me to obtain in undergrad. So that fulfilled those roles. The Michigan post-bac, while that was really great, I felt I needed some more outcomes and wanted to go further with my research before applying to MD PhD programs. So that's what motivated me to do the NIH post-bac, and that's where I'm at now. And while I've been interested in medicine since high school, I didn't really see a path forward for me as a person with a disability until I connected with other physicians with a disability. In my alma mater, Dr. Franmi Okanlami, I did a master's at Notre Dame, but is now practicing at the University of Michigan, and he uses a wheelchair. U of M has been really good towards including students with disabilities, and he was sending me a promo and was saying, like, look, you can do it. Here's all these people that are doing it and have done it. That was really inspiring for me, and was the final push of, okay, I really want to commit to this and put my efforts toward this.
Thank you for sharing that. Meaningful to hear how individuals can inspire and help you see that it is possible.
Absolutely.
What challenges or triumphs have you experienced during this time in your education?
So as far as triumphs, I would say where I've been able to train has been a major benefit to me. Of course, going to Notre Dame, going to Michigan, going to NIH, I really felt like I've gained a wealth of experience. That has been a huge triumph for me. I can't even believe I've gotten into all these places. Also, starting the disability club that I mentioned. When I first started my journey into medicine, I really didn't think of it as a way to specifically help the disability community. It started as a general interest in medicine, but when I realized my interest in advocacy and talking to more people and getting to know more people with disabilities, really started to become cognizant of all the different barriers to care and all these different challenges the disability community was facing, regardless of what the disability actually was, that we face similar challenges and barriers to care. So that motivated me to combine the two of, yes, I want to be a physician in general, but why don't I take this newfound interest in advocacy? In my continued experiences, the feedback I've gotten from, I'll call real people or other patients, you wonder, does being a physician with a disability make a difference? And I often think back to extended shadowing experience I had at U of M, where I shadowed with a neurologist for about 4 hours a week for over a year, I think. And you're shadowing, you're sitting back there, you're not really supposed to be making your presence known, but if you have a nice physician like I did, he'll let you ask questions and different things. And I've had moments where we'd have another patient in a wheelchair and they'd be talking to the physician, and then they turn to me and they're like, "Can I ask you a question about your chair?" And I'm like, "Sure, go for it. What do you want to know?" I had another patient recounting a traumatic medical experience, and you could hear in their voice they were imploring for empathy and understanding. My physician was doing the best he could, but the woman turned to me and goes, "I'm sure you understand." I wasn't saying anything, I wasn't doing anything, but it seemed like even just the presence of someone they felt could empathize did a lot in that moment. Experiences like that made me realize how powerful it is to have people in medicine of a variety of different experiences that can empathize with patients of all different backgrounds.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you've had that experience, that empowerment to see how amazing it is to have a health provider that gets it in this new way. And I liked how you said it's an unspoken recognition of, oh, you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I don't get everything, right? I haven't had every single patient experience, but it's nice to know that they see it as a positive point of connection rather than something negative. In all of my instances of being introduced as the student shadowing with us today, I don't think I ever got a look of, why is she doing it? It was very, patients always seem very excited and saw it as a positive thing. Even parents would come in with a child with a disability. They're like, "Look, she's in a wheelchair and she's trying to be a doctor." And it was just really nice. Of course, it hasn't always been a fun road. You mentioned challenges. For me, most of those challenges came in undergrad in the form of trying to find accessible opportunities. We need shadowing hours, volunteering hours, and all these different things to give medical admissions communities security that we're entering into this field with understanding and experience. And for me, I would apply to volunteer at the hospital, or, oh, we want our volunteers to do these very specific things. And if they can't do these very specific things, we don't really know what we have you do. Or it's about finding people that are open-minded enough to say, you might not be able to do some of the grunt work that we have a lot of volunteers do, but there are meaningful ways that you can help. And if you don't encounter people that have that perspective, it can be hard to gain access to those opportunities. For example, in my undergrad, I volunteered at a respite hospital for children, which is for medically complex children. You can't always leave them in the care of babysitters or caregivers. So for these children, if the parents had the wedding to go to or some other event, the parents could leave the children at this respite hospital called the Rosie Place. They have a full staff of nurses and physicians that come in. It doesn't look like a hospital, but it's fully accredited as one, and entertain the kids and provide them with enrichment while their parents were gone. But that place was fully accessible, of course, by nature of their patient population. They actually saw it as an asset. You can better connect with the kids here because you have similar experiences. So that was my main experience in undergrad. Notre Dame was an isolated campus. We don't have a medical school We describe it as the Notre Dame bubble, almost like a gated community of sorts. The hospital was really far out of the way. So if you wanted to get to those places regularly, you'd have to drive, which I personally don't drive at this moment. Luckily, I had family in the area that were willing to drive me to these activities. Without them, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So that was really challenging. Because on the research angle, because I'm interested in being a scientist as well, the same sort of thing. I was very lucky to have a father who's an academic and does wet lab work. After high school, we knew I was going to be transitioning to the power chair, and he's, let's have you work in my lab and we'll just troubleshoot this and see what it means to be a wheelchair user in a lab. I ended up really enjoying it, and that was the catalyst for my interest in research. But I often think if I hadn't had that experience and that opportunity and that privilege as a springboard, could I have gotten in the metaphorical door? For example, when I tried to find an undergraduate research experience within my institution, not to the fault of the investigators, but they were like, we literally don't know how to troubleshoot safety things. I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. Sometimes I ran into stuff like that. That was hard to gain that experience. So I had to be really persistent and diligent about trying to work around and try to find experiences that interested me, would be relevant to my application, and allow me to have a full experience. That was definitely challenging. But then to wrap this question, because of those challenges, my hours may not look as robust as some other applicants in the pool. I've had people pose the question, are you cut out for this? If your resume doesn't necessarily look like the other top applicants in this pool, while they didn't necessarily mean it to be, it does make you think and question whether you should stay the course. So having the resilience to say, no, I hear them, but I'm not going to listen. I'm going to stay this course anyway and give it my best shot, and how things fall will be how things fall. So trying to hear people, but not necessarily take everything to heart. As a person with a disability, do not underestimate the challenge of balancing the intensive energy demands of this pathway and the toll it takes while having a disability. Trying to meet the involvement and productivity demands of both research and medicine can be hard when you have other things on your plate that the average person doesn't have to contend with.
You said the word resilient, and I actually wrote that down in my notes. I just like creative, resilient, like these are the skills that we want physicians to have. We want researchers to have, because like you said, science is not easy. You don't just sit down and suddenly discover and get a Nobel Prize. It takes time and effort, and everything you're saying is exactly what we're looking for. I know that wherever the pathway goes, I know it'll be successful for you, because
thank you.
I just can't wait to see your journey, because especially like you mentioned working in the respite hospital, that experience doesn't matter if you spent 10 hours in that or just 1 hour, just by having that one-on-one 1 hour like experience and be able to talk about it and being able to connect is so meaningful. And I don't know any other medical students that can share that experience. I worked as a case manager and so I know very much the respite program you're talking about, because I had my caseload, because I was a case manager for children with disabilities. So like, I know very much like those respite programs, and that's amazing that you were able to be there. And so I really hope you'll have that opportunity to talk about that experience. So don't worry about the hours. Talk about the experience.
Like you said, unless you have encountered it or worked in it, a lot of people don't know that they exist. And I think it's a really great resource, not only for the community, but also for pre-med students, that these type of things exist that are a little bit different than the average hospital experience, but can still be really valuable and rewarding and exciting.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned your dad because I was going to ask you that earlier. How did you get into science and medicine? Could you talk a little bit more about
Sure. So I actually don't have anyone in my family that is directly in medicine or healthcare. My father is an accomplished academic, and so I very much knew the research side. But as far as clinical medicine, no one in my family is in healthcare. Navigating that was very hard. Notre Dame is a very pre-med heavy school. And I would ask my friends, how are you all getting this opportunity or that opportunity? And they'd say, oh, my parents work in X hospital, knew the director of so, and that's how I got this shadowing thing or this clinical position for the summer. And I said, that's awesome for you, but that doesn't really give me a way in here. I didn't even have a conception of what it meant to, and this is cynical here, but I don't advocate for stacking your resume approach, never. I had people in my classes that were crafting their pre-med persona since high school. That was just not my journey or anything I had even conceived to do at the time. Had more, I'd been able to have a more long game approach. There were some things I may have done differently. I just didn't have that knowledge at the time of, oh, this is something I should be looking into now versus next year versus, yeah. So that was challenging. I started as being much more well versed in the research side, understanding what it meant to be a PI, and those responsibilities were like, and what you had to do for that more so than medicine. I think in college I was like, as long as I do reasonably well and do some stuff here and there, I'll be fine, it'll work out, which very broadly is true. But I came to learn that ideally you'd be much more intentional about steps you were taking on that path. So that definitely took me some time to work out. For that reason, I was extremely grateful that my major advisor at the time, I was talking to her, and I think I'm interested in medicine, but I don't think the general freshman pre-med advisor is going to have the answers to the questions that I have. No, don't go to the general freshman person. You go straight to the top, you go to the dean. Most people don't start meeting with her till they're juniors, but you should start meeting with her now. I said, okay. So I did that, and she was the one that connected me with Dr. O and knew about him and was able to give me more specific commentary on what, or help push me toward someone that could give me a more personalized picture of what medicine could look like for me. I'm very glad that I had people push me toward that. Without being pushed toward other people, I don't think I would have had the perspective that I ultimately gained. Finding the right mentors and people to talk to is huge.
Yes, that is so important. I'm very happy to hear that you are joining us as a first generation pre-med or medical school. There's not a lot of us. I thought when I went into medical school, I thought the minority would have family members in medicine. It's actually the opposite. I'm really glad you talked about that and how it impacted you in your journey because it's really hard.
Yeah, it feels like there's a book you haven't read or a series of books that you haven't read that everybody else is coming in with knowledge about. Wait a minute, what even is shadowing?
I like that. I'm going to have to steal that analogy. I like that. It's such a good point. It's all this information that people have gained reading a book. And if you haven't read it, you just don't have that information yet. So it's important to find
big emphasis on the yet.
Totally. Yeah. I love it. I would love to, you talked a little bit about just promoting diversity and how diversity is very broad. Can you talk about your thoughts on the importance of having diversity and breaking stereotypes in medicine?
Sure. Essentially, I'm very glad to see this push in medicine to recruit trainees from a variety of backgrounds and seeing that as a positive thing. And then also trying to be cognizant that people might have certain challenges or barriers that might make their resumes look different than the prototypical applicant. At least that's my perception. I've heard more conversation about that in recent years, and I think that's really a positive. I also think about it with the perspective that I gained from my compassionate care and medicine minor. Our main program director would always say how you deliver the medicine is part of the medicine. There's actually research that shows if patients feel more connected to their physician, they're more likely to follow your health recommendations, and ultimately that improves health outcomes. And I think when someone sees themselves in their physician, or at least gets the sense that they are considering their unique context and experiences, they're more likely to be engaged in their own healthcare and have that be a more positive experience. Because I'll say, from my standpoint as a patient, it can be exhausting or frustrating when you're trying to explain your history or your perspective as someone with a complex medical condition. Even if that physician's trying to be as sympathetic as possible, there's no way that they can fully get it. So having people that can appreciate someone's unique experiences can only be valuable. If we have a homogenous group of people that only see things one way or come from a certain set of experiences, we can't do new things, we can't move forward, we can't do things differently and progress. So I think having a more diverse healthcare workforce can only yield progress.
Beautifully said. I love that you said how you deliver the medicine is part of the medicine. That is so key. And that actually is part of the reason I went into psychiatry, because that's what we focus on, is how we're there for the patient. What do we say? Doesn't matter what the patient walks out in. It's so important if you're there, present, physically and mentally with the patient.
Yeah, and that's huge for me. I was talking about this with mentor of mine who has a disability as well. And we talked about how focusing on the patient's personal and functional goals and improving quality of life is huge. The anecdote that I think I'm going to open my personal statement with is, on the first day of my compassionate care and medicine minor, the physician that was co-teaching wrote in big letters on the board, "Cure." And he's like, "This is what people think the primary job of a physician is." And then he erases the U and replaces it with an A. And he says, "This is what it actually is." I like sat forward and I'm like, I couldn't articulate that before. And I'm like, but yes, that's exactly it. That's what I think medicine should be emphasizing. And I think having that lens is important, because you're not always going to be able to make meaningful clinical improvements. Sometimes a person's disability is their disability, and you just have to focus on improving their quality of life and helping them meet their goals. Quoting the neurologist I worked with, he said, "You can always do something to help. Even if you can't cure or treat their condition, you can always do something." And that's what I try to think of and bring with me in my pre-med journey. I hope to carry that perspective forward into medicine.
I hope people listening to this episode take that, because I know it hit me also hearing that, putting the A instead of the U in cure. Like you said, there wasn't a way to articulate that before, but I love that professor who said that. That is so meaningful.
And that's not to say that trying to make meaningful clinical improvements isn't important. It is, of course. That's the ultimate. If you could wave a magic wand and do, of course you would, right? But it's just acknowledging that's not always going to be possible.
Yes. Oh, and I know you mentioned before your own experience being a patient with a complex medical condition like cerebral palsy. Could you talk about how that unique perspective impacts your perspective as now a future provider?
Yeah, so I think that philosophy of curing versus caring resonates because my own disability isn't going to be cured, and I'm fine with that. That doesn't bother me. It is what it is. But bringing that mentality of you can always do something, I saw it as a hospital volunteer, like how much a warm blanket, ice cold water, and even just listening does for somebody to improve their experience within the healthcare system. My experience as a person with a disability has really informed that perspective, and is what solidifies me in that perspective of, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to carry forward. I think sometimes we can be so focused on what intervention can I try that the patient's own goals get. So, for example, something that almost made me emotional when I was shadowing in the neurology clinic, my physician was seeing a child and listing different interventions that this child could ideally be involved in. He turns to the parents and says, But you can do all these things, great, excellent, but none of this should come at the cost of the child's social integration and feelings of inclusion. This child should be able to feel like a kid. That really moved me because when I was a kid, was when I was most involved in the healthcare system, and no one was asking those type of questions. No one was thinking with that kind of lens. And I think using that lens is valuable because those are the kind of questions that I needed people to be considering for my own socio-emotional development. And I wish that there was more emphasis placed on that. So I think that perspective is what really informs what I hope to bring to medicine.
That is so helpful. And I really hope that everyone listening hears that, recognizing the quality of that person's life, no matter what their age. But yeah, definitely when we're thinking of children, you can't just always be in treatment. They need to be a kid. Like you said, there's some way they can still be a kid and they should have that opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. In adults, at the end of the day, it needs to be a decision of how much we want to balance intervention and treatment with the other aspects of life that tend to be more important and more meaningful to people. So I think having those values-based conversations and promoting shared decision making when making plans of care is really important.
Thank you. All of those have been phenomenal. As we start to wrap up, I would love to hear any pearls of wisdom or advice you have for individuals that have either a physical or non-visible disability. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, for sure. So especially for people like myself who may not have a background in or a family in medicine or people immediately available to them, I wish for me like that as soon as I had realized my interest in medicine, I had dove in to research and networking with other people. Like, how exactly do I do this? What exactly does this look like? Both at the basic level of what's expected of a student or what's hoped for by a student applying to medical school. Maybe I could have been a bit more strategic about how or when I did things. What's been really valuable recently is once I realized that there were disabled physicians out there, networking with them. I got on Twitter. I was like, oh my goodness, there's this whole circle of people out here. Another big point was Stanford Med started having the Disabilities in Healthcare conference. I think that started in 2020, and it was one of the highlights of my pandemic experience trying to be pre-med. Like, how am I supposed to be pre-med during COVID? How does any of this work? And I get this email advertising this conference. The biggest thing for me was they made a networking spreadsheet of like all the virtual attendees of this conference, and it ended up being better that it was virtual because more people could attend. I had this giant spreadsheet full of disabled people working in healthcare. And I literally just read their descriptions and I made this big list and I just started emailing them. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to do this. Could I have a few minutes of your time to hear your story, tips and tricks of what you did? Like, how did you navigate having a power chair in the operating room? People were so generous and gracious with their time and sharing their stories. And so that's my biggest thing. It's as soon as you realize that interest, dive in. Hey, you can, it's more effort up front, but it'll hopefully save you time and frustration down the line by knowing more. And also for people with disabilities, I've learned that sometimes things take longer, or you have to be more strategic with your energy demands. So maybe you might have to space things out differently or budget more time for something, but you can only do that if you know beforehand a bit about what that looks like. People traditionally take 3 to 6 months to study for the MCAT. If you learn about the MCAT beforehand and say, this looks pretty intense, I don't know if I can do the canonical schedule with the demands I'm dealing with, the energy levels that I have, you might have to extend that out. And you can still apply on time, but you have to know. And that's just a very concrete example, but I think that goes for a lot of things because I know for me, sometimes I'm still getting out of the habit of planning like I have traditional energy levels and that things don't take me longer. I plan as if I'm not disabled, and that only hurts you in the long run. Accepting and being strategic and smart about it can be really helpful into meeting your goals. Yeah, research and network is my 2 word summary of how to set yourself up for success.
I love it. Those are both so important, and I completely agree with you. I think it's actually undervalued, or like we don't talk enough about the value of networking. I've started to see a pattern that the individuals who are successful realize that they don't know everything. And so it's going
Absolutely.
out and trying to find other people who have been able to do what you want to do and do exactly what you said, like hearing the stories, getting advice. That is so powerful.
Absolutely. From a practical standpoint, I wish that people with disabilities didn't often have to give people a blueprint, reduce their own barriers, or solve their own problems. I wish, you know, things were far along enough to where people will be like, oh, I know how we can support you, and you can show up into a space and it's all awesome. But we're not there yet. So, from a practical standpoint, learning from the experiences of others, when you encounter someone that says, you seem great, but I don't know how we're going to support you, you can say, I talked to this medical student at such and such institution who has similar needs to me. This is how they did it. In that way, you open up an opportunity for yourself. You were about to get turned away, but the knowledge that you had prevented that and allowed you to take advantage of an opportunity. Sometimes arming yourself with that knowledge is what's necessary to allow you to keep moving forward.
And you mentioned a good resource of the Stanford Medicine, their conferences. The disability medical community, docs with disability, they're coming. That's actually one of the motivators for. I have a page on my website where I have support groups and I list all those because it's hard. It's hard to just coming in
Yes.
with nothing to figure out where everything is. And so
I got plugged into those from Dr. O initially. He's very involved in the space, and he's at Michigan, which has docs with disabilities. By following one person or group on Twitter, you get recommended in others. That's how I got plugged into those resources. The word research and network can seem scary, but literally what I mean is scroll through Twitter, put out a tweet, do a Google search, deep dive on Reddit. It's out there. It's not hard to find, but it's out there if you look for it. I feel much stronger going into it, knowing that these resources exist and what has helped other med students with disabilities in the past. I feel a lot more clear going forward, knowing about the resources that I know about.
Amazing. We are here to support you there. Once you get plugged in, we are here to support you.
Yeah.
We love to see everyone grow. All the amazing reasons that you mentioned, that's of the taking care of patients and just bringing that perspective to the medical community is vital. And thank you, Monica, so much for sharing. I'm going to do a summary of all the amazing things you said, and then we'll finish it off. So I wanted to share that you are a first-generation pre-medical student, and that didn't stop you. It was so important for you to find mentors, find advisors, and try to figure out what you could do with your own limitations. And that ability to be creative and resilience and find a workaround is really what helped you be successful. That allowed you to then figure out how to get into volunteer opportunities and research and clinics in a way that was meaningful to you and powerful for the type of physician that you want to be. But then also you talked about your experience in a wheelchair, having a complex medical condition, and how that experience has motivated you to take care of patients, to truly care about them. You took that as doing that minor in compassionate care medicine. I love that name, compassionate care, and focusing on how you deliver medicine, not just the pills or the IV. It's all about how you show up. And you gave the advice of how important it is to research and network with other individuals. That way they can support you and help you on this journey so you don't have to be struggling on your own, because you're not the first one. There are other people out there. And really, you aren't alone. You can see from Monica and all the other people who've been on the podcast and will continue. There are so many people out there that have struggled but have kept going. I am so happy to see Monica and hear a little bit about her journey and keep seeing her as she progresses to hopefully an MD PhD student here soon.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, definitely. For individuals who want to get in contact with you, how can they get in contact with you?
So my Twitter is mmesakar, first initial, last name 99, and my email is the same handle at gmail.com. Either one of those would be great. DM me, send me an email. Obviously, as pre-med, things are busy, but I will do my best to get back to you, follow you back, all that.
I think that's how we connected, is the Twitter.
Yes, so I got Stanford's mentoring group email where you had spoken, which is a great resource that they have now, and followed you based off of that. And then you followed me back, and here we are.
I love that. Power of social media. There is good.
Yes, the positive elements to social media.
I try to focus on those. I try to make more positiveness and more real and authentic. We'll do it together. Thank you, Monica, so much. I love to remind everyone at the end of all my podcasts, if you haven't already, obviously subscribe, whether on podcasts, YouTube, but also I just like to remind everyone that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there here that are ready to support you. If it's Monica, hit her up. If it's me, MedPsych Moss. Thank you so much, Monica, again, and I hope to see all you next time. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.